Well, good afternoon here from the Canadian Outdoor Farm Show in Ontario. And we're standing in front of our alpine plots here to take a look at, maybe some of the opportunities that we have for you, as well as a helicopter behind us. So what the neat thing is when we start looking around at our corn plots, we want to start looking at points of influence. And when we're looking at that, we're going to start discussing at what point can we make a difference in a corn crop's life. And for a lot of times, it's like from the minute we put it in the ground. So I want to make sure that you start to concentrate when you're growing crops, even when you walk through them this late in the season, that we're looking at what did we miss, what can we do better at, and how can we become more successful of making sure we reach the genetic potential in our crops. So the neat thing is, we have opportunities of putting the seed and setting the seed in the ground properly, and putting a low salt fertility around it. Something that has an available form of phosphorus, which is our orthophos, also balanced with micronutrients, making sure we keep our zinc and our phos in balance, our ratios in place to help the plant be able to manage the nutrients a lot better. Once that plant is emerged, we want to make sure that we have uniform emergence, because this is where we make a lot of mistakes. We'll think we have a planting date, but what the planting date is compared to the emergence dates becomes very important to understand. The emergence date is when we want to see uniformity, because if we get too much variation there, we're going to see stress on plants throughout the entire season. Once we get that plant up, we want to make sure that we have proper nutrition in place, because when we get around that V3, interesting things are going to start to happen. And we know when we look at a cob later in the season that it has basically even numbers of rows around it. We also know that that will never change. These are actually, number of rows are set back close to that V3 timing, which means if the plant is stressed, we will eliminate rows around. If you take and go from 18 to 20, 20 to 22, you're going to find that you can increase, or the potential to increase, over 10% of your crop yield by just doing something that's relevant at that V3 stage. Once we move beyond that stage, it becomes more important to know that we want to keep our crop clean, but it is also making sure it never runs out of nitrogen. Nitrogen being basically the nutrient that we receive all our protein from, still becomes huge into its ability to actually convert it. So when the nitrogen is put in place, we want to make sure the plant has a metabolism to move this nutrient, and that's really where we come and start talking about our potassium acetate or our alpine BioK. And when we start thinking about that, it's a matter of motivation of our plant throughout the whole season, creating energy so the plant can do what it wants to do naturally. And that's a big part of growing this crop forward. Later in the season, what's going to be important is how do we foliar feed plants? And as you noticed, we've actually brought a helicopter in to help us out with this demonstration. When we're flying on our fungicides later in the season, what's really neat is when we can take our alpine BioK. It has basically a weight, a specific gravity of 1.29, which is compared to water at 1, allowing the aerial application to pull our nutrients and our fungicides deeper into the plant to help with plant health throughout the season. So again, we just want to look at a few things recapping. We know that plant points of influence are during germination. We know plant emergence is becoming key. We want to set up that plant for plant health in the early, so we can set up all our cobs, reproductive positioning within the plant. And then as we get the plant bigger, we want to make sure that we're allowing ourselves the opportunity to keep the nutrient balance in these plants at a high level so that we can actually get our crops pushed to the maximum capacity of their yield. That's it for today.